last time I was visiting my family back east, my 12-year-old nephew told me he wanted to get a guitar and learn how to play. This was pretty surprising because his general childhood path, much like his father's, was clearly established as a sort of slow-witted jock thing. But apparently he'd been allowed to stay up late to see Jonas Brothers on Saturday Night Live, and now he wanted to get a guitar and rock out. I too had tuned in to see those three brotherly Disney confections howling off key on SNL, but their awful performance mostly just left me feeling confused. The Book of Revelations had promised me there would be 4 horsemen. I then remembered that Saturday Night Live had played a part in my own punk rock awakening when I was a little kid, growing up in a very, very small town in western Massachusetts at the dawn of the Reagan era. I was just one of 3 punk rockers in my entire hometown, but as often happens, we found each other. And we thought we were really onto something with those first couple of Ramones albums, a scratchy cassette of Black Flag, and seeing Devo's first appearance on Saturday Night Live. This was our template. This is how we were going to define punk rock for ourselves. And so, with a couple of really cruddy pawn shop guitars and a few days of practice, we were a band. And after slogging through a few basement parties and a scandalously bad VFW show, we scored a rare and beautiful thing, an actual road gig. It was an off-campus college party, and it paid almost $100. And all we had to do was get to the State University of New York in Buffalo, which was only 400 miles away. And now, it wasn't about the money anyway, but this was the first time anyone had ever agreed to pay us anything. And at the time, I was pretty much living on Utica Club beer and 5-pound blocks of free government cheese. I'll do a little disclaimer here so that you're not confused. What you're not about to hear is a glorification. Think of it as a cautionary tale. At this point in time, I've been completely drug, alcohol, and chemical-free for a whole bunch of years. A fact I'm not only proud of, I'm smug about it. But Jim Carroll said we're all a little in love with our sins, and these are mine, so here goes. So, the band had a road gig. Good news, but it was a problem. Now, my band had lots of problems, starting with the fact that I was the brains of the operation. We wanted to maintain the DIY punk rock aesthetic, but we also desperately wanted to be cool. And we so weren't. We didn't even have the quintessential beat-up old van to go to gigs in, and we had to borrow cars from our parents. So there we were, a badass punk rock band on the way to their first big gig in a borrowed Chrysler station wagon and a Gremlin. For gas money, we cashed in my rather impressive collection of empty beer bottles, and we were headed west. And it was a good gig. It was in a huge off-campus house filled with a couple hundred people like me. This was the first time I'd ever seen more than half a dozen punks in a room together. And here there were hundreds of them. A critical mass of punks. And the guy throwing the party was awesome. He had even made a poster. And we were listed second. With our logo. A major score. And this is the best part. Even though we were from the podunk hinterlands of western Massachusetts, on the phone I had kind of said we were from Boston, so that we would have that gritty urban street credibility that we so desperately craved. And he put that on the poster too. Direct from Boston, bad plasma. We played early in the party, and I'm told we put on a good show. My repeated headlong dives into the stage monitors being a major crowd pleaser because they thought I was doing it on purpose. We even got almost halfway through the set before we each started playing different songs at the same time. You see, being the brains of the operation, I had to write up the set lists, which I did. I wrote down 10 songs, and I taped it to the drum kit. Then I wrote down 10 songs, and I taped it to the bass player's amp. You're ahead of me on this one. Then I wrote down 10 songs, and I taped it to my mic stand. And I was so trashed already at that point, failed to write the lists in the same order. Needless to say, the results were somewhat dissonant, but no one really noticed. Least of all us. Now, very soon after we finished our set, I proceeded to lock myself in the only available bathroom and pass out for several hours, successfully making me the least popular guy at the party. When I finally woke up, we were asked to leave immediately. Our gig money never materialized. Big surprise. And we were forced to panhandle those same angry punks that I had kept out of the bathroom for 5 hours for gas money to get home with. Not surprisingly, they weren't very generous. Now, since I had been, well, let's call it sleeping through most of the party, I was more or less sober enough to drive. But I was exhausted, and there was no extra money for even a small coffee. And that's when our drummer came up with a plan. He produced from his pocket a hit and a half of LSD and decided this was just the thing we needed to keep us alert for the long drive home. Really, it's the sort of plan only a drummer can come up with. Now, I took the full hit because I was driving. And he took the half so that we would, quote, be on the same wavelength as he rode with me in the station wagon. Now, God help me, it sounded like a good idea at the time. All I had to do was keep my eyes on the gremlin for 400 miles, and everything would be okay. I lost sight of the gremlin about 30 seconds after we got on the New York State Thruway. All of the red taillights on all the cars trailed together, and suddenly, everywhere I looked, I saw gremlins. Well, we were screwed, and we knew it, so we decided to just stick to the road, follow the moon, and let the chips fall where they may. And you can pretty much guess what happened next. On a long and lonesome highway at about 4 a.m., we were stopped by a couple of New York State troopers, apparently for driving well groovy. We were ordered out of the car, and as my feet hit the cold, cold pavement, I suddenly realized I wasn't wearing any shoes. And I couldn't remember when I had taken them off, or where they were, or what the basic concept behind footwear in general was really all about. But I knew they were Doc Martens, because they had to be. Now, my wavelength... Oh, God. My wavelength co-pilot decided he was more together and he should do all the talking. A lot of talking. Way, way too much talking. He was handcuffed immediately. Now, surprisingly, the cops didn't slap the cuffs on me, in spite of the fact that when they turned on their big Maglite flashlights, I actually said, "Wow, do that again." Well, I just stood there giggling like a complete psychotic. Now, I don't know how much experience any of you have had with highway patrolmen, but trust me, this sort of behavior just doesn't fly. They decided to search the station wagon, and this is when things got really scary. I mean, we knew they weren't going to find any drugs. I mean, we never had extra drugs just laying around. But they were just tearing apart the car, and they were trashing our stuff, and they pulled the guitars out of cases and threw them down on the side of the road and just scattered our stuff for 20 feet in every direction. But they seemed to get bored with it pretty quickly. And just when we thought we might be in the clear, That's when they found the panties. At this point, I should tell you a little bit more about the band. Our bass player, who, as fate would have it, was somewhere up ahead in the safety of the Gremlin, thank you, was a very, very good-looking guy. He was tall and dark and lean as a greyhound, and all the girls loved him. And some of the boys, too. And apparently, at some point in the party, some point I was asleep for, he had met a special girl. And they had decided to share something beautiful and meaningful in the back of the station wagon. And overcome by passion, she had accidentally left her underwear behind. It's a beautiful story, really. But now it was 4 a.m. and 2 state cops had 2 very bruised and messed up guys talking gibberish and in possession of a woman's undergarments, with no explanation of where the girl might be. There were many, many difficult questions asked in the glow of those cosmic flashlights. But either they were really bad cops, or we were just so obviously and pathetically incapable of murderous mayhem that, as luck would have it, they got another emergency call on their radio. And then they basically looked at each other and said, "Oh, the hell with it. Just pick up your stuff and get out of here." And so we did. 5 hours later, we were home. We lost over $700 on that gig. A fortune. And I never found my shoes. But we had rocked, damn it. My nephew has so much to look forward to.